Did you want me to type
Okay.
it?
Okay, we're going to get started here in just a few seconds. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Election Day. Hopefully you got a chance to vote. If not, hopefully you'll be able to before the evening is over. Excited to be here with you again this afternoon for our Making STEM Connections webinar. Today's webinar theme is going to be on makerspaces, how to design them, what to put in them, set up, things like that. We have Lori here with us today, Lori who works on our Pint-Sized Science program, and Lori is going to be monitoring the chat room. So if you have any questions, thoughts, or comments, you can go ahead and put those into the chat room, and Lori will either try to answer them or she will share them with the group, and then we will collectively go through and talk about those. So keep those coming. Probably the number one question I get is, when is the rest of our stuff coming? So let me address that for you. So you should, there are some people at this point who have received everything. And I know that there are many that haven't. So let me explain where we're at in this. So we purchased your cart, your tools, including the drills, the hand tools, the things that I showed you last time from Lowe's. And they have been an amazing partner for us in getting this many items of each of these materials, these tools themselves. Sometimes it's hard to find, 600 cordless drills from a supplier. So they've been an amazing partner in that way. And we also hire them to do the delivering. So they have come up with a schedule, and it has not exactly gone the way that I had hoped, but it is under process. It has begun. The process has started, and if you haven't received your tool cart and the other tools that come with it, you will be in the next couple weeks, and I can guarantee you, you will have them by the end of the month. And I had hoped that you would have them by the end of October, but that hasn't happened for everybody. I apologize. It's quite a process to deliver these kinds of items to the corners of the state, but I promise you, you will get them soon. The other items that you're still waiting on are some of the smaller things that were on back order that we have packaged up and have those ready to go out, and you should have those either by the end of this week or the beginning of next week. And this would include things like tape dispenser, duct tape, some of the office supplies, more needles for your sewing machine, a seam ripper, Dremel tool or Legos, depending on whether or not you got the K3 version, you get Legos. If you got the 4.8 version of the kit, then you get the Dremel tool. Also, if there was any of those pieces that you didn't get, some of you, there was, you didn't get an iron or an ironing board, those will also be coming in this last shipment. So very soon, if you don't already have everything, very soon you should. I sent out a few weeks ago a checklist. I'll send it out again for you to go through and make sure that you have everything. Some of those items on the list came from the training that you took over the summer or this fall. Some of them have been shipped to you in the black totes. Some of them are being delivered by Lowe's. Some of them, it's kind of a hodgepodge of sources, but take some time, go through that, make sure that you have everything, and then if you could sign it and scan it and send it back to me, just so I know that you have all of the pieces that go with your award. I know it's really hard. Some of you took this training at the beginning of July and you're still waiting for things, and I totally understand that. I want you to know that we're working really hard. We truly are working really hard to get all of those parts and pieces to you. It's an amazing experience. It's a lot of things to put together in order for you to get these amazing tools. So if you're still welcome to send me questions about that. I know I get lots of emails, and I do my best to try to respond to those, to give you information about when the materials are coming. But you're welcome to send me more. I have asked for schedules from Lowe's so I can say exactly when, or at least by week when you'll be getting things. But if you haven't received your cart yet, know it's coming in the next couple weeks. My understanding is that some of them are going to be shipped by FedEx just to ensure that they get out on time. So remember to talk to the staff in your building or your organization to let them know that these items are coming and that those belong to you and into your makerspace or whatever area you have for that. It can be confusing sometimes if a delivery comes from Lowe's and there's cordless drills and there's clamps and a toolbox that other people in your building, your facility staff, your custodial staff may think that that belongs to them. So make sure that they know and understand that that goes to you and it goes with your makerspace, which is so exciting that that would even be an issue to be concerned about or confused about, right? Because who would put those kind of tools in a classroom? We would. You would. And that's what's really exciting about this. Okay, so again, if you have questions about that, feel free to email me. You can put them in the chat room and I'll do my best to give you the best information, most up-to-date information that I possibly can about it. At the beginning of each webinar, I like to share with you some ideas of things that you can make or create using the materials that are in the kit. I also love to share with you things that people have been doing, people awardees. So please share with me if you've got some new ideas, some exciting things. Sometimes I share them on the Facebook page. Sometimes I'll share them in the webinars or emails. But as you're getting these tools and materials, please share with each other. How are you using it? What are the challenges that you're facing? How have you tried to address those challenges? What are the new and exciting things that are coming up that you're trying? And we want to really create this network of support all across the state. So again, share with us what that looks like. How are you using it? How are you adapting it? So let me show you one example of some things that you might do with kit materials. In the materials that you received in the black tote, which should have been last month, you got a collection of copper tape. This is what the copper tape looks like. If you've never used copper tape before, it is originally used for things like stained glass windows or jewelry making, and it is copper metal and it is an adhesive. So when you peel it away, it sticks to things, hence the term copper tape. You also received a collection of button batteries, so batteries that look like this. Remember that these can be a swallowing hazard. So if you're using this with young children, please be very careful not to let them get a hold of these and put these into their mouth. You also received a collection. This came in the Janeco box, the separate little box that had some of the electronic pieces in it. A box that had LED lights in it, various colored LED lights. The intent of these is to allow you to make something called a paper circuit. So last time we had our webinar, I showed you how to sew a circuit using the conductive thread and the special LED lights in the battery holder that you got. This time I'm going to show you how to make a paper circuit. So in making a paper circuit, you are going to use the copper tape in place of wire. So you just adhere it, you peel back the paper and you adhere it to a piece of paper and you connect it to the battery and the LED lights in order to create a circuit. There are templates that you can download online, and I'm happy to share these templates with you, but I got them from Makerspace. They have a whole book, actually, of free downloadable PDFs of paper circuits, but here's an example, very simple template that you can use to create a paper circuit. And what it shows you is where to put the copper tape, where to put the LED light, and then where you put the battery. A couple pieces of advice. When you are doing this and you're using the copper tape, I highly advise that you put the tape down in one piece. The more times you cut the tape and reattach it, the more difficult it is for the current to flow through it. So for example, when you're doing these corners, you can kind of do like a mitered corner, like you might in like a quilt, where you can fold it and then turn it here, and fold it and then turn it, instead of cutting it into pieces. That's one piece of advice that I have for you to make it a little bit easier when you're doing the circuit. If you've ever made paper circuits before, they can be very touchy. They can be challenging. So I want to show you an example. So we have a little LED light right here, and the idea is that you put the battery in this spot, and then when you fold it, then the light should light up, okay? And sometimes we have a problem with it because the current has a challenge sometimes moving through the tape, and so you kind of get a short in here. Something you can do is to add Scotch tape or clear tape over that connection, and it helps to press it down so that you get a better connection with your LED light for it to light up, okay, so that you can see that you've created the circuit. So that's one piece of advice. You can also download a little bit more complicated templates and talk about things like parallel circuits. This would be a series circuit. You can talk about parallel circuits. So here's one that I downloaded. And it's a Valentine's Day one, and I'm going to show you the inside. So the inside has this complete template that shows you where to put the lights, where to put the battery, and how to hook it all up. And then you punch holes in this top part so that when you fold it up and you press on the heart, then the lights light up. Okay, and the challenge is that I find, and many people do find when they're doing paper circuits, is a lot of times it doesn't work. So you have to press on it, or the current doesn't go through very well. And so we've come up with a solution for this that I would like to share with you. The soldering iron that you received at your training that came in the green bag, remember there was a kit, and it has a soldering iron, it has some solder, and it had a little stand. You can solder lights to the copper tape, ensuring that you have a better connection. Let me show you an example. So here is a setup. So we have a parallel circuit, and you see the LED lights, and you see the copper tape. And what we did was we took the soldering iron and the solder, and we literally soldered the LED lights to the tape so that we have a better connection. Something to think about, though, when you do this, is that a current has to flow from positive to negative. And the LED lights have a positive end and a negative end, just like the battery does. So you do have to line it up correctly when you do something like this. That's the nice thing about the templates, is the templates kind of help you out. This little packet down here is a little foldable battery holder, which I can send out to you as well. We have a template for this, so that when you put the battery in there, it holds it for your paper circuit, so you don't have to do the folding corner. So then when you put it in there, and then you press down, then you get the lights to light up. Here. Much better connection, much more reliable than just the tape itself, is soldering the lights to the copper tape. So it's a little bit more challenging because you have to pull out the soldering iron, and that can mean that you have to think about safety in a little bit different way. One of the things you're going to get in the last set of materials coming are the gloves, the heat-resistant gloves that students can wear when they are using the soldering iron or the regular iron, for example. And so that will be helpful. The soldering iron is very hot. It also can make fumes. So it may not be the best thing for every situation. You can do paper circuits without it, but I've found it works much better if you solder it. The key thing is to solder it to the tape, not to the paper, because that could cause the paper to burn. So maybe this is a good way to start with a very simple version of creating a paper circuit, and then you could work up to a more advanced version of a paper circuit, which could be a great way to learn those soldering skills, which could then be the next step after that could be soldering circuits and wires and other things like that. Okay, so that's a great example. Paper circuits can be really fun. They can be a little challenging because sometimes it's touchy, but what a great opportunity to do some problem solving with that. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is more with our textiles. And if you remember at the training, I had a bag that I sewed out of fused plastics. So this time I made a new bag. I didn't sew it, I just fused it. So I wanted you to see that you can create a bag without having to use the sewing machine. So I'm going to show you. This is the bag that I made out of bubble wrap and a blow pop from a blow pop bag left over from Halloween because I really liked the colors of it. And And I have 2 layers of bubble wrap. So I have a blue layer and then I have a clear or a green layer that give it different colors. And then I just put some colored circles on the back here. This entire bag is made completely out of fused plastic. I didn't sew anything. I just fused the pieces together. And basically, I made a very simple pocket that just doesn't really even have a bottom per se. I just made a pocket like that and fused all the pieces together, especially I reinforced with extra plastic the ends or the seams to make it strong. And then I added some fun colors to it to give it some texture. Something else I added, because I love bags like this, but if you have a small thing like a flash drive or paper clips or pens or pencils, and you throw them into a big bag like this, they can get lost. So I made a small pocket here on the inside. So this small pocket, also made out of bubble wrap, has an opening, okay, like this, so that you can put smaller things inside of there, and then it sits down inside of the bag. I would like you to know that this is the 4th version of this pocket, because when I was fusing it, I fused it to itself, or I melted it, or I fused it to the bag, or I fused it upside down, and I got very frustrated. Very, very frustrated. So it was a really great experience for me, first of all, to think in those steps of how am I going to put these pieces together? Because it's all about heat transfer. You have to put the parchment paper in the right places. Otherwise, the plastic gets fused together in places maybe you didn't want it to. So think about the problem solving and the thinking process of saying, okay, I want these pieces to fuse together, but not these pieces. So where do I need to put the parchment paper? How do I work that out? How do I go through those steps? And how do I deal with the frustration level of something not working? In fact, this one has a hole in it. I patched it because I was so fed up with it. I'm like, I'm just patching it. I'm not starting over again. So I just put a patch piece over it and it works. Okay, the other thing I learned from the first bag that you might have seen at the training were the handles. Great bag, the handles keep coming off. So this time what I did is I took this green bubble wrap, and it had squares. So they weren't like the kind that you pop like the circle bubble wrap, but they were green squares. And so what was nice about that is I could cut them into strips. So I cut it into 2 strips, or two wide, so 2 square bubbles wide, and then I folded it in half and pressed or fused it in half. But I left the ends separated. So I fused one end here and one end on the inside. So basically it was like a clamp like this. Also, had to think really hard about that one because I needed it to fuse to both sides of this without fusing to the other side of the bag. Lots of parchment paper, lots of planning and thinking so that I got it done correctly and didn't mess it up, okay? And what a great project for your students to work through, right? And try this out and make this. And they could, I literally was telling my husband the other day, I need a bag for carrying my files and folders in back and forth from work. And then I was like, Jolie, just make one. Just make one for yourself. What do you need in it? How big does it need to be? What does it need to have? I wanted to make it I wanted it to be waterproof so the rain couldn't get to it. Plastic is a great way to do that. I've been thinking that maybe I might put some Velcro on here or here maybe so it will stay closed at the top. I'm still thinking about that. I don't know for sure if that's really how I want to do it, but it's an option. And so far I've been carrying all the stuff for today's webinar, all the books that I brought in here, and these handles have held up just fine. I've not had any problems with the handles so far. So this could be a really great project for students to work on, and designing something that is useful to them that they can use, has the sizes. You can make a messenger bag. It could be a sling bag that goes, you know, across and over their shoulder. They could make a backpack out of it. It could be something really small that they just carry in their hand. I was also thinking, haven't done this yet, but I've been thinking about it. What if you made a small bag and then you made some kind of clip to put it, like hook it onto your backpack, and you could use the 3D pen to make the clip, like an S clip, something like that, so that you could attach it to. Haven't done that yet, but I'm thinking about it. So if anybody tries it, let me know. I'm going to try it and see. Again, it's going to take some thinking on my part to design it, but I think it would be really neat to link them somehow using the plastic from the 3D pen to another bag, like a backpack or something. Okay, so I'm 100% in love with this bag. I love it. I love the colors. I love how it turned out. Another idea that I have is making one that folds up into itself, so it has it in a small pocket, so I could take it like to the grocery store, keep it in my purse or in another bag, something like that. So I'm gonna think about that and work on that, see what that could look like. Any thoughts or questions on how I made the bag, challenges, anything like that? Okay, I'm excited to see if you guys want to try something like this with your students with the holiday season coming up. It could be a gift to make for others as an appreciation gift. It could be something that they make for themselves. And truly, the best part of things like this is students often say, people, including myself, say, I need something, I want something, and we think, well, we need to buy it. But we want to empower ourselves with the ability to make it. And we can make it however we want. We can change the length of the straps. We can change the size so that it fits a Chromebook, for example. What if they could make something for carrying their Chromebook in it? How could it have different compartments for different things that you need? If you need storage for your cords or pens or pencils or something like that. And what's really great is if you're using plastic, you potentially have lots of materials to choose from. So instead of going out and buying a whole bunch of fabric, you could use plastic that would otherwise need to be recycled or thrown away to kind of prototype it and try it out. One last thought that I had while I was making this is, what about seat pockets? I see a lot of teachers make or find from somebody, purchase seat pockets so they go on the back of the chair. I wonder if students could make their own seat pockets. I'm not sure how plastic would hold up to them sitting and pulling on it, you know, on a regular basis, but it'd be interesting to try it. Wouldn't that be cool if they could make their own or design their own based on their chair or their needs or something like that? Okay, awesome. So let's go to our topic for today, which is to talk about makerspaces. That's our theme for today. How do you design and set up a makerspace? I would like to start off by showing you a video. This is a video from one of our awardees, Ann Reynolds. She is at Crestview School of Inquiry in Clive, actually, Iowa. And some of you met Ann at the training. She was at the training here in Des Moines. And I want to show you her makerspace. She is a librarian, so you're going to see a makerspace in a library. And I would like you to watch and think about all the different things that you see happening in the space. Look at how the students are interacting with the making materials as well as each other, and what you see adults doing in this space, one of my favorite things is at the end is how do they clean up? So let's watch and see what Ann shares with us about her makerspace.
The Makerspace allows our learners to practice what it is that they need to know for their projects, and that's collaboration and learning from their mistakes. So this is just an opportunity also for them to have a little fun. Can you show how you work together and you use the tools properly?
That scared me. I thought you were going to say that. Let's see if we can bring that.
come back in a moment. You show me when you're all done there. Let's see. Awesome. Nice. Let's see what we got.
No, put it down. Okay, let's do what they're doing. Okay. Oh, I forgot that one. Okay. What?
Good, good, good.
I did something here.
What are you making? Tell me about it.
A helicopter. We're making a helicopter.
Nice.
These are to start the engines to blast off. These are the wings.
Are those wings?
And these are to control them.
Yeah, good job.
It lets the kids be creative. It lets them use their imagination.
What do you say?
He loves it. I like this. These are horses. These are people. The little things are people. This is the swimming pool because it's blue. And we climb up here and then we just splash dancing ball. So we dance over here. We have a party. It's a boss.
You got a little town in here. That's great, guys.
And these are our horses. Yeah. Let's go!
Wow. That's awesome. Let me see you do it again. You guys got a race going? Yeah?
Try it. No bait. Wait, let me try.
That's great. Good.
Maybe if we show you. But that's not
You may have to, yeah, that's not helpful. You're going to have to put another one on top. Can you put another one on top of that? What if you use this one? Ah, okay, let's see how that helps, huh? Whoa, put off the top.
Jonah wins. Where'd it go?
Where is he?
Ow!
He made it.
Yeah, go back. Come on. Thank you.
You show us how quickly and quietly and neatly, no thank you, you can clean up today. That would mean next time we wouldn't need as much time, so you would have more time to use the Makerspace. Try it.
In my office. Just put it in my office on the counter.
And then also girls, let me show you
We're building with Thomas and making stuff and doing teamwork. Many balls and we were like practicing and now we got it. It's fun. It's really exciting. You can do a lot of things with teamwork in it.
Why Makerspace? Because it allows kids to fail. So it's okay when you take them to the Makerspace in the Media Center and they fail. Encourage that. They'll love it.
So, great example. I love that video because Anne is able to show us lots of things going on at one time. Comments that I hear sometimes is that doesn't look like a typical library. And when it is their Makerspace time, it probably isn't a typical library. But what you see happening is students experimenting, collaborating, tinkering, thinking, figuring things out, problem solving, and they're looking at that space in a very different way during that time. And what I love about it is that I hear from many people, well, do we need to have a separate room, or we don't have access to a separate space. How can we do it? What Anne is able to do is during this time is turn a library into a makerspace. And then probably my favorite thing is the cleanup at the end. I love this statement because what they do is they stop the students and all, at the end there's all this excitement going on, and share with the students that it's time to clean up. But the more efficiently they clean up now will help them next time to know, the teachers, to say, okay, we don't need as much time to clean up. They can have more time in the makerspace, less time to clean up. So it puts the responsibility on the students to think about how are they going to clean up, and how does that reflect or respond to their time the next time they get to have access to the makerspace in the amount of time that they're allowed to use it. So I think that's really great. Anne is fabulous, and I'm sure if anyone has ideas or has questions about the ideas that she's using, she'd be happy to share with you. Something I want you to think about from that video too was there was lots of stuff going on, lots of stations and lots of materials. So when you're thinking about your makerspace, you should always have a dream list. Always. No makerspace is ever complete, just like no classroom is ever complete. So maybe there's things you saw in there that Anne has in that space that you think, oh, that would be really great. I would like to have that. Write that down. Whether you know the specific name like spheros or something like a wind tunnel. You can purchase that wind tunnel that Anne had there. You can also make your own version using a tabletop fan and some flexible acrylic and some hoops that are used for like cross stitch. You can make something like that. So always be keeping a list of those items that you would love to bring into your space, whether they're permanent or whether there's something to just have for a short period of time, something new to try out. Maybe you have a section of your makerspace that is flexible and that you switch it out on a weekly or a monthly basis. But always be looking for those new and exciting things. So let's talk about that. What is your makerspace going to look like, or does it look like, or could it look like? And what I would like to share with you is there is no one answer to that question. The makerspace is reflective of what are your needs, what are your students' needs, what are your ideas, and how does it best serve your staff as well as the students and families that you work with. What it looks like this year might be very different than what it looks like next year, or it might change as the year goes on. But let's look at some traits and some kind of helpful hints to work with you through this process. One of them, a book that I highly recommend, is called Makerspace. And it was written by two people who work at the D School, the Design School at Stanford. And they have a fascinating story because they designed their makerspace and it had to be moved 5 different times. And you would think, oh, it's Stanford, right? They have all the money in the world. No, it started in a trailer. So they had a trailer as their first makerspace, and then that trailer, they no longer had access to the trailer. So they had to move to somewhere else. And so then they had to convert that space into their makerspace. And then they lost that and had to move somewhere else. And it's a really great story and journey in the design school, that's what the D stands for, of how they continuously reinvented what does their makerspace look like. And I highly recommend the book. It's got lots of suggestions, ideas. It's got design schematics in it for how to build things, how to purchase things, how to make things. I don't know how you can see this, but it gives you some of those details on how to make a lot of these items, tables, seats, dividers, whiteboards, writing places to share with thoughts and ideas, for posting things. It's a really great book with lots of good examples. Okay, so here's what the book looks like. And something that they highlight in this book is this idea that the physical space is very important. Space matters. We read our physical environment like we read a human face. And if students come into a space and it looks inviting, it looks creative, and it challenges them to think differently, they're more likely to use it in that format. So I want you to think. I want you to think about what does your makerspace look like? So imagine your room that you have, either the room that you're in or the space that you get to use, and it may be a temporary space. It could be if you're coming in for an extension office, you may say, I only have access to this classroom for 45 minutes. Is there a way that we could modify it? Could we change it? It could be a dedicated space. I've been to many schools across the state where they have specifically dedicated a room, a space, an area as their maker space. And sometimes, while that sounds really exciting, sometimes it's very overwhelming because where do I begin? So let's think about that. We have a blank slate here, right? Just a very basic room schematic. What are you going to do? What are you going to put in there? And where are you going to put it? So let's think about that. Computers. Oftentimes people want to put some high-tech components in there, and it could be a station that has some dedicated PCs with specific software on it that allow you to do things like design CAD type software. It could be something for video games, for building video games, but maybe you have somewhere that is this computer bank. Seating. Where are you going to sit? Where are you going to have the activities happening? And we're going to look at lots of examples today, but flexible seating is very important in a space. It could be tables separated from chairs, not desks. It could be the kind of tables that you have. It could be the height of the tables. There are tables out there that are on a type of pulley system that can be raised and lowered. So they could be at a seating height as well as a standing height. Or maybe you have some of both. I've been to maker spaces where they have an area that have tables that are meant for standing height and then specific area where they have tables that are for sitting height. But be flexible. Then you might say, I don't know if that's the right way I want to set it up. Maybe I want to put the computer bank, this computer area in a different, location. And by doing that, you have this space open here in the corner. Let's talk about that. What could we use that for? Maybe it's for woodworking. Let's say that you want to have some saws. Maybe you have a table saw of some sort, or you have a drill press in there, or you have a sander, or maybe some other kinds of tools, a lathe, or something like that, where you can do woodworking. The challenge with having woodworking tools in your makerspace is the creation of dust. Lots of sawdust. And you certainly don't want to have that sawdust getting into things like your computers or printers or something like that. So you may want to have some kind of divider. So I've seen spaces where they specifically built these walls here. They're not load-bearing necessarily, they're just divider walls. And this opening was kind of a heavy plastic like they use in refrigerator spaces, like at the grocery store where they have their produce and they have these heavy plastic kind of slabs hanging down so that you can walk in and out, but it tries to trap the cold air into one space. I've seen spaces where they did that, so it helps to keep the dust inside of there. If there's a window here, or you could have a ventilation system, that would be great. Otherwise, you can get a portable ventilation system, or you just keep a shop vac in there and you just vacuum up after yourself to try to limit the amount of dust. Okay? But maybe that's an option. Maybe that's something that you look at, separating out this in that space. Some other things that people often want to include is a green screen. So green screens can be used for recording videos and movies and allow you to replace the background. So it will read, the camera, iPad will read that green background as whatever input image that you would like. So you could record a video of a student in front of a green screen and impose on the back of it a scene from somewhere around the world or in space. Or some other creative option. Green screens are usually very easy to pop up. You can have like a frame that makes it very flexible to pop up your green screen. It could be something permanent too. But it is really a great opportunity for students to be very creative with video production. If you had a green screen here, you could move these tables. That's part of that flexible seating to create more space for recording or whatever you might be doing there. Storage. One of the biggest things, the biggest challenges that I hear from teachers is, where do I keep all this stuff? Where do I put everything? Storage is really important. If you have a closet in the room, then you might designate that for certain items. But if not, shelving and cubbies, we're going to see some other examples of that later in the webinar, but definitely give yourself some dedicated space. It could be shelves up above your computer bank. So there could be some, shelves that students maybe can't get to, but you could on a step stool or something like that, so that you're using this higher up space. Definitely very important to think about storage and where you can put different things or have storage for student projects, things like that. 3D printer. I often hear about that. Should we have a 3D printer in the classroom or in the space that we're using? Something to think about. They're loud. They take a long time to print. So if you have it here, you may want to, your 3D printer, you may want to put something around it or put it in a space where it's got some natural blockage for sound. Potentially, if that's where you keep it. You could put your 3D printer in the closet so that you could close a door, for example. Some other things to think about. What if you have an area for sewing machines and a cutting table? So maybe you put something over here. Think about outlets. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but maybe you have sewing machines here along the wall where you have outlets, and this is a cutting table for fabric. So you could lay out your fabric or the other types of textiles that you might be using. Something else that they talk about in the Makerspace book are movable whiteboards. You can make your own whiteboards using coat rack materials, movable coat racks that are on wheels. Here, I saw some great things when I was up in Storm Lake. In one of the makerspaces they have there in their middle school, is they 3D printed attachments for these whiteboards to store markers for using, and a little hook to put the spray bottle and wipe, like some kind of cloth for wiping and cleaning off the board. So it attached to it. So they printed those attachments on the 3D printer to go on the movable whiteboards. What's nice about these is you could move that whiteboard so that it could separate a space. Not only could it be a place for students to record ideas, but it could divide an area. So you could put it in between some of those tables and create a separated workspace or design space for students. You could put it around the 3D printer if you were looking for something to block that sound. Some people have whiteboard material on the tables themselves. And I've heard some people that love that, and I've heard some people that don't like it at all, because if you scratch it, if you put things on the table and you scratch it, then that damages the surface. I've heard of some people actually putting a whiteboard material directly on the wall itself so that you're writing on the wall. Lots of great options to think about that. I like the movable whiteboard because not only does it give you a surface to write on, but it allows you to create separated space if need be. So imagine we started with a blank template for our room and then designed and thought about what are those things that we want in there and what is it, where are we going to put them? Always be thinking, what are those dream items? What are the things in there that you want? Do you want to have a CNC router? Is that something you want to have in that space? Do you want to have a robotics area? Maybe you're focusing on something else. Maybe you're focusing on very low-tech things versus high-tech things. How would you lay out the room differently? Lots of things to think about. Always be planning, designing, and thinking, and always be looking for that new space. I've heard of some amazing opportunities in all these schools that I've been to of turning what used to be a storage closet, or one of my favorite is the room that used to store computers, so the computer lab. Well, many schools are going one-to-one now. So when there was no need for the computer lab anymore, the teacher proposed that maybe that could become our makerspace, since that space wasn't needed for computers. And that lent itself to having kind of the right formatting for that room to allow lots of things to be plugged in, have Wi-Fi access, those kinds of things. So as you're thinking about your makerspace, here are some things to keep in mind, 5 things that I came up with for you to keep in mind when designing your makerspace. Number 1, the space needs to be safe. both physically and emotionally. So think about this. In your physical space, lighting is very important. If you can have any access to natural light, it is useful not only for being able to see the materials so that you're using them in a safe manner, but also for the students having access to that light that is putting them in a more creative mindset. Power cords. Be very careful if you have things that are away from the wall and have extension cords. How are you securing those cords? You can use gaff tape, something else to put over those cords so students are not tripping on them. Something you might think about is, can you get drop-down cords from the ceiling so that they're not going across the floor where students might trip on them? Always have first aid kits available. You got a small one in your Makerspace or in your materials for making STEM connections, but if you're using this in multiple rooms or if teachers are checking materials out, you would want to have more than one first aid kit so that whoever is using that space has access to it. Ventilation. Very important. I've also been to a school that has some amazing tools that I am drooling over. And they have challenges using those tools because they don't have adequate ventilation in the space. So money was spent on the tools, but maybe not in thinking about whether or not that room would be the best room for it because it doesn't have access to ventilation. Things to think about. Walking paths. Be very careful as you're designing your space and you're thinking, okay, we're going to put this here and that there. Is there safe space for students to move around, to get from one part of the room to another? Think about how Anne had her library set up. You saw that there were students moving around that space all the time, maybe transitioning from one station to another. What are those safe areas that don't have materials in them for students to move around the space? It also, your makerspace needs to be safe for ideas. Encouragement, celebration of all possibilities, including failure. So students need to feel like this is the place to try things out. This is the place to be creative and think about it. And when you're fusing your bag and your pocket doesn't work and you've gone through it 4 times, they need to feel like this is the place where we do that. This is a place where we celebrate those steps in discovery of figuring out what is the right way to do it or what did I learn from that process. Here's an example, a picture. This is a makerspace that is in a public library in Chicago. And it's interesting because you think, well, there's really no roof and there's not a lot of walls separating it. So it's separated from the rest of the library so that you have a feeling that you are in a separate space, that this is the makerspace. But the lack of covering on the roof is to allow as much natural light into the space as possible. So there's many windows in the upper part of this atrium, and they wanted to allow that natural light to get into the space. Okay, so it has its own area within the main library, but you can see that it's separated, but still has access to lots of natural light. Second thing to think about when designing your space is, how do you allow for collaboration? How do you allow students to have that opportunity to work together? Flexible seating is really important. If your desks are in rows and they're not able to move those around to create pods or other types of groups, it makes it very challenging for students to think that way. Having access to some type of way to share ideas. Could be a whiteboard, could also be a digital format. If there's a screen, maybe they can connect to that screen and put their ideas up onto a video screen of some way or onto an iPad so that others can see it. And also encouraging students to see the interdependence of each other. So who in the room has some kind of expertise to share? Or what did so-and-so learn last week when they tried to use that tool and it didn't work right? Allow them to see the resources of each other in that space, okay? And how do they benefit from having those other people there with them, both in their personal growth, but also in the development of the ideas that they have. So look at this space. lots of flexible seating. You can see that there are bean bags, there's a couch, there's harder seats, lots of options. I've seen amazing ways that teachers have put flexible seating in a makerspace. I see the wiggle stools a lot. I've seen chairs, lots of different versions so students can select where they even put their chair. I've seen the use of foam type seating that makes it very easy for students to pick them up and move them to different parts of the room. And it's amazing when you go into those spaces is that you look at it and you think, this doesn't really look like a classroom. Or my favorite question is, well, where am I supposed to sit? What a great question. Where do you want to sit? What area speaks to you? Where do you feel more comfortable? And maybe the floor is that space. But oftentimes students walk into a learning space and they automatically know I'm supposed to sit in this seat or in this row or in this alignment. What a great opportunity to walk into a space and wonder, where do I sit? Maybe they get to select that themselves and choose based on their interests. Number 3, you need to have a place where students can share their results. A display area or an opportunity for them to share their reflections on what they have done and what they have learned. What this looks like could vary. It could vary throughout the year. It could vary depending on the space that you have. Maybe you literally have a showcase. So it's a case where students can put materials, ideas that they've had, end products of something so that others can see it. Maybe it's others in the school. Maybe it's out in a lobby, or maybe it's in a more flexible space that is centered to the community, somewhere in the public library, maybe. Maybe it's something that gets shared during some type of 4-H session. So it could be something physical. It could also be something digital. Students could use the GoPro camera, for example, to take video or pictures, and then they could display them on a loop, a monitor, so that it loops through and shows a video of. They could create maybe their own video that replays over and over based on their project that they made or created. I think social media is an opportunity here too. I have seen classrooms that have created their own closed Facebook page or their own Instagram page or even Twitter. And I know that's very challenging for some schools. Some organizations have policies against the use of social media, and I understand that, but if it's an opportunity for you, ask. Could you create for your group, for your organization, for your classroom, an Instagram page where students or participants are able to take pictures and upload those and share videos or stories or ideas. If you use Facebook, it could have a closed Facebook page, and you, as the educator, could be the person who monitors it. It could be only you that allows for things to be uploaded and submitted. But we live in a world that is inundated by social media. How do we use that? How do we connect with the world through that? Think about it, investigate it, find out what ways you could use that to your benefit. Here's an example of how we have it set up. In our Makers exhibit, we have a creation station. And some of that station is blocked off. So there are intentional pieces. So when we have, for example, camps over the summer that make things, or students in our preschool, we can put those into those cases that are separated. There's like a plexiglass type of material that's here, so visitors can't get into it and touch it. The intent there is that the students would like to have those things back at the end of the display time. So by the end of the week or the end of that month or whatever it is. Then there are open spaces in the creation station. So visitors who come to our Makerspace that create something, if they would like, can just put it up on the shelf and let people look at it. And maybe they take it with them at the end of the day, and maybe they don't. Maybe they leave it as a point of inspiration. I've seen people come to this creation station, take some of these pieces, take it back and add to it, modify it, use that as a point of inspiration. So it's kind of a give and take space where you could get inspiration and new ideas. So that's what we call, that's our creation station. Another way that we share ideas is, this is a whiteboard wall. It's a flexible space wall. We can move it around. And not only do we put ideas on there, but you see that we put our social media connections here. So our different hashtags for our Instagram pages. So we encourage visitors who come that either make something at the Science Center or they make something at home to share that on our social media page. And we monitor it. So we have to watch it and make sure that there aren't inappropriate things that are put on there. But it's really exciting to see all these things that our visitors are able to make and create. It's a great opportunity to share that. Another thing to think about in your space is being flexible. This is a really important part of your makerspace, is to think about all the time, or all the ways that you could use the space in a different way. Can the room be completely cleared? Can things be separated or blocked? Can you move things around to create a space that allows for something else to happen? So if you have an opportunity to purchase tables or chairs, think about that. Can they be on wheels? Can they be on some kind of casters that have a locking system? Can they have varying heights? Either tables that are themselves flexible or some tables that are taller, some tables that are shorter. Can the equipment or the furniture be used in multiple different ways? You can create seating out of foam blocks, but those foam blocks could also be stacked together to create a separating wall for dividing a space into two. Can the materials that you're using or the equipment you're using be quickly packed up and put away? Sometimes a makerspace could be a table. That's it, just the table. So the tools, materials, and equipment that you bring and put out on that table, can they quickly be put away so that that table can be used for something else, you know, during the next class or with the next person who's coming in to use that space? So how can you plan it out so that you can pack those things away very quickly? Think about all the different ways that you can make too. A makerspace could be based on sound. I've seen makerspaces that are really focused on music. So they have a high-tech area where students can record sounds and music, and then they have different types of tables for mixing that music. But you can also have a place for playing instruments, writing music. That could be the focus of your makerspace. It could be an old family consumer science classroom, and you have stoves and ovens and microwaves. That could be your makerspace. How could you use those tools and equipment in a different way? It could be based on agriculture. It could be a barn. It could be a garden. That could be your space. How can you flexibly use that area, that what is there, what is that that you have access to in very flexible ways? So here's an interesting picture. I got this off the internet, and you might look at this and say, oh, that's really cool. Look at those tables can be pulled apart and moved. It looks really kind of, you know, the color is exciting. But what would this say to a student if you go in there? Does this say be creative? Maybe it does to some students. To some, it may feel very sterile. It may feel very prescribed of how it's supposed to be set up. This might be a great space for your students, or it might not. It doesn't all have to match. It doesn't all have to be made by the same company. It doesn't all have to have the same color scheme. It might, but it doesn't have to. And the last suggestion I have for you is to keep your supplies and tools visible. Don't pack everything away in a closet where nobody can see them, because then they're less likely to be creative and using those materials for their various projects. So maybe you might use shelving that has clear boxes so students can see into those boxes to think about, oh, that might be a tool I can use, or that's something I can have. Pegboards. Pegboards are a great way to attach various types of storage containers so that it could be flexible and moved and students can still see into them. Label containers. So let's say you do have to use containers that are not clear. So it might be different kinds of boxes or shelves. Label them. Let students know what's in here. What do they have access to in that space? If you got, let's say, the alternative cart and you have the plastic tote, remember it's the 3-tiered tote. Open it up. Let them see all those things that are in there. If you have if you're using one of the tote boxes that we sent you, the black ones with the yellow lid, leave it open. Let them see what's in there. What else do they have access to? Think about how we did that when we were making the name tents as one of the first activities at your training. Here's an example of how you might use something like a pegboard. So there is an attachment to the wall here, and you can get these through Uline company. I'm sure other companies sell them too. But then you have these containers here that attach to these connectors. So you could get various ones of sizes. You can attach and unattach them so students can take them to their tables, and then when they're done, hook them back up there. It could be divided by groups. Maybe different groups each get a different color, and then they reattach their storage unit there. And over here you see pegboards, various ways that you can attach things to the wall. Use that wall in a different space so that they can, again, so students can see the materials or tools that they have access to. We want to encourage a makerspace to really be a we space, not just an I space. So it needs to have that feeling of collaboration. There may be times when they need to have some separate I think time, but they also need to be able to come together and have collaborative time. So encourage that in the space and in the way you've set it up. I want to show you some pictures now, and some of these are from places that I've been or that people have sent to me. Some of them are ones that I've just found on the internet. What you see here are two different makerspaces from the Exploratorium in San Francisco. The book you received, The Art of Tinkering, the brown one that has like the paper bag feel to it, was written by staff members that work here at the Exploratorium. It's a fabulous museum in San Francisco if you ever get to go. And this is their tinkering studio. And it's part of their tinkering studio, I should say. And there's a couple things that I want to point out to you. First of all, love this, which is their chandelier. It is made out of plastic hangers. And the way they attach those hangers together. So there's a light fixture, and then they assembled the chandelier based on these plastic hangers. What you see here is a table that's got a lot of material set out on it. There's usually a staff member there that is facilitating this. The windows are some display places for people to share their ideas, but it allows those who are not in the studio at that time to also see those products that people have made, but also look into the space so that they can see into what people are doing. You see here that there's a divider wall. This divider wall kind of separates this tinkering area, and these are just cardboard tubes. We have this at our facility that separates out our tool time. It's not very heavy. It's very simple to put together, and we got the tubes from Uline. They're for shipping documents that are rolled up, and then we just put the little sealing tubes on them, or the caps, and then created a flexible wall to divide a space. So this is their tinkering space that is open to the public. This is their tinkering space for their staff. So this is the work area where they actually are building and creating things for the museum. So I wanted to show you both of them, one that's open to the public and one that is not. And what I love about their real tinkering space is how organized it is. Think about, remember we talked about there's natural lighting up here. There's also other lighting to support that. Or to be in addition to. Look at the organization that they have. Look at the safe walking space that they have. And they have different areas where you can sit and work on something. There's ventilation in here. So these are two great examples in the same facility of two different types of makerspaces. This looks like a very general, typical classroom, and this could be a makerspace. What I like about this are the tables that can be put together in a group or a pod, but they can also be assembled into a straight row. So you can use them in very different ways. You have some shelving over here, so you can have making tools or equipment components here that students pull off the shelf. And I like the shelving up here so that you could, or this counter type space where you could display what students are making. Look again at the light. There's access to natural light here, windows, this big door opening here, so light can come in. I like this as, again, it looks like a typical classroom, but could certainly be turned into a makerspace. This is what you might more typically think of as a makerspace in an educational setting. First of all, I love the name, the collaboratory. And you see that there is some space for students to work individually. There are some spaces for students to work collaboratively, and their projects are stored up here on the wall. Again, light, so there's windows, there's cords that are hanging down here from the ceiling. We see a flexible cart, so a wheeled cart that has different tools, so you could bring that cart in. Students can have access to those tools at that time. And what I really love is along the wall, do you see these outlets? So they can easily plug things in right there at table height for whatever tools they might be using. A makerspace could be an area in the hallway. This could be during a family night or during a community STEM festival. It could be the space between two people. So here are two people sitting on the floor, they're working with little bits, and that student is having a making experience on the floor in the hallway. Doesn't have to be a setup space. It doesn't have to be a dedicated space. It's a mentality. You could turn any area into a makerspace. Here's an example. Here's a locker bank, right? And maybe a common area where students hang out. This could be a great opportunity for a family gathering or a school event. And you could turn this into your temporary makerspace for that evening or for the length of that event. And students could be using this as a display area or a work area. Again, look at the lighting. There's lots of light in the space. It's very open. Here's a library that has seen some repurpose to it. We see a more traditional view of a library over here, and there's a checkout desk, and back here, which you can't see, are the book collections, which is very valid, very important. But this librarian really looked at, here's some more books here, but this librarian looked at this space in a very different way and said, how can I have this be a more interactive space with the making tools? So here you see a Lego wall, a vertical Lego wall, which we have at the Science Center. I've seen schools put this in. I've seen them put it on a flexible wall so it wheels around. I've seen them attach it to half walls. I've seen them attach it to full walls. You can buy these plaques as a sticker with adhesive on the back. It's amazing how many people will spend half an hour to an hour sitting in front of our Lego wall, building, making, and creating. It's fabulous to watch. You see that the furniture doesn't necessarily match. You see the wiggle stools here. So some are those, some are chairs, some of the flexible seating. There's a small computer area. There's floor space. It doesn't all have to match. It doesn't all have to be set up the same way, but it creates a mentality. I love some of the things hanging from the ceiling and this on the wall that's encouraging them to think. For those who are really like this idea of organization and the way things are kind of put together and labeled, this might be a fabulous option for your makerspace. It could be a pegboard wall that has labeled areas. What we have for us at our tool area is pegboards, and we have all the tools there, and then we outlined with paint the shape of the tools so that when our visitors put it back, they know where it goes, because the shape of that tool lines up with the image, the painted image that's on the pegboard behind it. One challenge I see with this is some of these things are very high up. It might be a little difficult. You might need a stepping stool for people to get up here, but I love how they have the tape organized. You see they have hot glue guns, they have little bins. Students could easily come to this space and find the tools or the equipment that they are looking for. It could literally just be a table in the space that you have. I love this idea of a tinkering table. And maybe you put different things out each week or each day or during each session that you're working with them. And this looks like it's a take apart station. So you can have some leftover equipment. We'll talk about this during our technology webinar, that you can have some old VCRs or other types of answering machines, different things like that that are sitting collecting dust somewhere that your participants or your students or your visitors could take apart. Use the precision screwdrivers. You're getting those from Lowe's if you haven't gotten them yet, but those tiny little screwdrivers to take things apart. You're going to get a magnetic bowl from Lowe's. So you can have this magnetic bowl, and then as they take screws and different things out, they can put it into the bowl, and the bowl will hold on to that so that they could use those screws again to put it back together or for something else entirely different. It could literally just be a table that you put things out. If you're coming into a classroom, let's say you're visiting somebody's classroom, you could put these things out on the table. Students could have an experience for a short amount of time. You clean it up, pack it away easily, and move it out to do something again somewhere else. How about this one? How about a couple shelves? This could be your makerspace. It could be take one of these bins that has flexible materials, and what can you make out of it? It could be as small and simple as that. Do not be overwhelmed by thinking you have to design or create, this entire mecca of a makerspace. It may start as a small portion of your room, or a part of your library, or a tote that you take around with you as you go from place to place or classroom to classroom. That could be your makerspace. But think about how you can encourage students to think differently using the materials in that space. Some things to think about. You'll notice in all these activities, there was no center space at the front of the room for the teacher. The teacher should not be the focal point of a makerspace. It's not about the teacher, it's about the students working collaboratively with each other. So you don't have desks and tables all facing one general direction. That's not necessary in a makerspace. Number two, it doesn't have to be a completely clean and fresh space all the time. In fact, if you come into a very sterile, well-organized, cleaned, perfectly maintained space, you may feel like, I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to get it dirty. Having pieces left over from the last person or some of the tools left out might encourage somebody to think along those same lines or add to it or feel comfortable in creating more of a mess in the space. You don't have to have it all planned out right away either. You don't have to have this grand scheme of everything. Start small. What is it you want to focus on? Maybe the cart that you get from Making STEM Connections is your makerspace, and that's where you're beginning. But don't stop there. What else do you want to have? What kind of things do you want to add to it? It can be a process that might take a few years, really, for you to get to what you think, in your mind right now is your idea of what you'd like to have for your space. You don't have to have it all figured out now, but start small, keep that dream list going, and add to it as you keep experiencing and trying out new things. I would like to show you a few minutes of another video of a makerspace that was set up in a school. And something to think about, first of all, you're going to listen to the students talking about what they think about the makerspace. You're going to hear the facilitator, the teacher here, talk about the hours, the timing of the makerspace, and how they got this space set up. It is from their library. That was the space that was dedicated for this, and how did they change and manipulate that?
Think of something that might be useful to other people, and you can make it real, and you can ask people what they think about it, and you can get help, and you can work with other people to make something really cool and unique.
Like that you can make, also that you can make anything you want, and there's challenges, and prizes, and that you get to create different things.
I like the fact that people can make whatever they want. It's their idea, and you have all kinds of cool stuff that you can make stuff with, and it lets you do it.
I like how we can make our own video games and how we can make our own things off of a 3D printer.
Any inventions that you might have, or something that
maybe someone hasn't made before, but you think would be a good idea to make? I like how you're able to be as creative as you want, and you get to, like, instead of following a set of directions, you can do your own idea.
So my name is Andrew Gooden. I'm the Makerspace facilitator here at Grant Center Arts Academy, and I'm pretty sure that I have the best job in the world. I get to help students be creative with their own ideas. So the Makerspace is not a scheduled class, it's a drop-in, sort of a library model. Students can come in starting before school at 7 a.m. Many parents will say to me, 7 a.m., you expect my son or daughter to get up at 7 a.m.? Well, surprisingly, there are kids knocking on our door at 7 a.m. to come into the Makerspace. The Makerspace is a place for students to be creative with high-tech and low-tech tools. So we've got a class set of laptops, 10 iPads, a 3D printer, a bunch of high-tech stuff. But then we've also got a bunch of recycled materials, and students have been able to do some pretty incredible things with both.
Like some string or something. And that's why I think the internet is working. Oh, like a jewelry. Like a jewelry stand? Make a jewelry box. That's what you can attach no, like an actual box. Like make the lid and then make a box and you can attach like hinges. See, that's not pretty.
Yeah, these RC cars, especially the old-fashioned ones, are so hard to take apart.
I want the motor inside.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I want the motor. I don't want anything else, just the motor. It was only $2 at the garage sale, so I was like,
The motors are what, $3 did you find?
yeah. I mean, it wasn't like $2. This thing was like cheap. It was a garage sale, so of course it was cheap.
Yeah, but I think if you could get the motor out, that would be pretty cool.
Okay,
I think that's your key, is to pry out there.
See, I poked myself?
Yeah, I was born in New Jersey, grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and had an awesome science teacher in middle school who got me into Science Olympiad, where I was constantly making things, building things, testing things, loving science. So I went to Washington State University for college and studied chemistry there, worked there on a miniature explosives detector. That's where I was doing lots of soldering and electrical, that's where most of my electrical knowledge comes from. And then taught chemistry at Soldan for 5 years before coming here to Grant Center Arts Academy. So Gregory Hill ran a Makerspace here last year on Fridays, and I came and dropped in to see what how it was going, what kids were doing in the Makerspace. And then we were touring the school, walked into this room, and I said, oh my gosh, this needs to be a Makerspace. There's all this natural light here for the natural light helps with creativity, and we need to have the Makerspace here. So we were able to consolidate the library to 1/3 of this room and then use this 2/3 for the Makerspace. I worked with Lynn and some of the other staff members, and we were able to make it happen for this year. This year has been amazing. Last count, in the first 10 days of school, we saw 175 students who visited 555 times. So it has been incredibly popular. Just yesterday, Thursday, we had our busiest day ever with 80 students coming in one day. That's going from 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And we're seeing some pretty incredible things. We're seeing 2 7th grade girls who have discovered most of simple circuits without any direct instruction from me. So they are building a cardboard robot, and they wanted this robot to have eyes that light up. And so they started with a battery and a light. And soon they realized, well, they want the light to be kind of farther away from the battery, so we're going to use some wire. And then they realized, well, the battery's going to run out unless we put a switch in. So I put a switch on their table, didn't tell them anything about it, and they integrated it into their circuit. They left one day saying, my gosh, that was the hardest thing we've done all year. So they're really pushing themselves to make these incredible things. The students are learning also that they have to be part of a community in order to be a successful maker. So they're showing each other their ideas, they're critiquing each other's ideas, and then iterating upon those ideas to make them better and better. The beauty about the Makerspace is that there's high-tech tinkering and low-tech tinkering. So we have students working on game design using a website called Scratch, where they're working on games and computer animations. We have students doing 3D modeling with a website called Tinkercad and then printing off on our 3D printer. But then we also have low-tech tinkering. You saw today students working with cloth, we're the sewing machine that we've ordered is on back order. So right now they're just hot gluing the cloth together. But what's been amazing is how they're able to still be creative given the obstacle of not having the correct tool. We have a ton of cardboard, and what I found is that cardboard is really amazing for the first prototype of something, and then as they iterate upon that prototype, make it better and better each time. As a Makerspace teacher, I'm definitely more of a coach. So I am coaching students and pushing them to build the best that they can, to make and have a high level of creativity and show me their creativity with their products. It is sometimes like a feeding frenzy in here because there's a lot of things that students are tackling that they've never experienced before. Things like circuitry, 3D printing, even just the computer skills that they're having to utilize here in a makerspace that aren't necessarily utilized in a traditional classroom. And so we do have procedures. When students have a question, they ask their partner first, then they ask somebody who's a part of a different partnership, and then they ask me. But as you can see, sometimes that needs work. We're working on building that procedure into it. The saying of our makerspace is definitely got iterations, and it's a story that goes back to a kindergartner named Austin who needed to draw a butterfly, and this is a well-known story taught to many educators. So Austin needed to draw this butterfly, and his first version of this butterfly was definitely needed work. It was just a sketch and it was kind of off-center, things like that. Well, he iterated this 5 times. Each time he brought it to his teacher said, nope, make it better, nope, make it better. And this was for a project that they were going to sell these for a fundraiser. And so by the last iteration, he finally had this amazing butterfly. And this is just a kindergartner. So what I learned from Austin's butterfly iteration story is if you push students, they will meet your expectations and even go far above what you expect from them. Our boxes here are modeled off of the Mythbusters warehouse. If you've ever seen the show Mythbusters, they have all these boxes, and there's sports balls and wires and electronics, and I thought that would be a good, just given the space we have here, I thought that would be a good arrangement for the space. It's very student friendly because the boxes are open so you can peek inside. A lot of times if students are struggling with an idea, I'll say, hey, can I hand you an item and then you make something that includes this item? As an example of that, I handed a student a toilet paper roll, cardboard toilet paper roll, and told her to make something that a kid could play with using this toilet paper roll. I figured she would maybe make something with a marble or use that as a ramp or a tunnel. She ended up making a firefly catcher, the most creative thing you could possibly think of to use a toilet paper roll for. And in her second iteration, she's attaching a light bulb to this toilet paper roll so that as you're in your backyard looking for fireflies, you can turn on the flashlight so you can make sure you don't trip over something. Pretty amazing stuff. I would love if students left the Makerspace at the end of the year thinking about everything in their life from a design thinking perspective. That is approaching any obstacle, any challenge in life with this mindset of just making a minimally viable prototype and then iterating upon that prototype to make it better and better. You can do that for a resume. You can do that for applying to college. It's not just making and tinkering, but that mindset of design thinking. One of the really nice things about the Maker.
Okay. So I just wanted you to see kind of another perspective of how to design and set up a makerspace. And I think he gave us a lot of great information to think about. What is amazing to me is those students choose to come before and after school. It's not facilitated during the day. It's not part of a class. And they come just because they want to come. And what a great experience for students to have that as an option as a before or after school activity to go to a makerspace and to work on a project over a period of time. And a project where they're learning a lot of those concepts, those, for example, science and STEM concepts from their class in this opportunity for them to create and make on their own. So I think that's really great. I also love the way that he set up his space. He was talking about Mythbusters. If you ever watched episodes of Mythbusters, that's how they have it set up. So they have shelving units with white boxes, and the white boxes are labeled saying here's what's in here and here's what's in here. In that sense, it's a really good way to organize all of the materials on the shelves. It's not super expensive. You can see he was just using file folder boxes, cardboard ones that you could get. A real simple way to do that. He talked about using a lot of recyclable materials, things that are not as costly and expensive. Really great example, but even more so is that mentality. I love what he shared about students, that their first question has to be to their partner. The second question has to be to another partner group. And if they still can't get it answered, then they can come to him and ask him. And I can see where that's a challenge to get that process set up, but what a great way to encourage partnership, working with each other collaboratively, and recognizing that the other people in the room have a lot of knowledge, understanding, skills, and experiences that can help to support you also in your learning.
Jolie, we have
Yes.
an interesting comment that might be helpful for everyone. This teacher is wanting to know, when do students generally get to access the Makerspace, and would it be at lunch or free periods, or should they have scheduled classes?
Fabulous question. Here's how I've seen it done. I have seen where the Makerspace is an actual class that students go to, and sometimes they're only in there for 40 minutes. They only get to be in there for 40 minutes in a week-long cycle, for example. It might be more than 5 days, but basically in a cycle of the classes they go through. But it is a dedicated room that they go to, and they have that experience. There are some schools where they don't have a Makerspace at all, and they have access to the materials, and teachers go and check out those materials. They put them into a tote or a tub, bring them into their classroom, do a maker's activity, and then they take the materials back when they're done with them. So it happens within their own classroom or their space for whatever activity they're doing at that time. So it's very seasonal in that sense. I've seen where it is in the library, and the library time that is normally scheduled in a classroom type schedule is used for a Makerspace. I have seen where it is a before and after school lunchtime opportunity. I've seen it used as a PBIS reward, getting to go to Makerspace. I've seen it used lots of different ways. I've seen public libraries have their teen time or homeschool opportunities for people during the day, teen experiences after school that they can come and use some of those tools either with their parents or alone by themselves if they're coming to the library. There's lots of different ways, and what I would say in your choice of how to use this is think about what is it that you want in this situation. If you have a classroom, let's say you're a classroom teacher and you have these students for the most part from this time to this time, except for when they leave for specials or something like that, perhaps you have a time in your schedule where you're doing Makerspace activities, or you just embed it into the activities that you're already doing. Maybe that's an option. If you are a teacher, I know many people who've been awarded the Making STEM Connections program move from building to building. So they might be a tag teacher, or they might be an instructional coach who goes to help teachers in multiple different buildings. So maybe you do a short activity using some really simple materials that can easily be put out on the table, packed up and put away for next time. And the students kind of get a chance to have that experience, and they can reflect on it later, and maybe the next time you come back to work with them or something like that. Another option is to have it be things like a Genius Hour. So maybe I've seen some teachers who do that. Every Thursday from 2 to 3 is their Makerspace time, and you get to work on whatever you want. It's your choice. You just have to tell us the plan, what it is that you're going to make. You can have access to these materials. If you need something more, you may have to find a way to get extras or more of something if that's what you need. But think about, what is it that you want? What is it you want to have for your students? What is that experience? Is it an option for them to do something creative outside of just their content that you are focusing on at that time? Is that your focus? Is it your focus to have them think about the library in a very different way, or to see the library as a different type of resource? Is your focus to create entrepreneurial thinking, to think the next step is not just knowing it, but what am I going to do with it? How could I use it? Many people do challenges, and they scaffold those challenges so that students are constantly faced with something where they build on what they learned from the previous challenge and use that in the next challenge. And maybe that challenge doesn't have anything directly connected to their content, but encourages that kind of thinking and that kind of problem solving. So what is it that you want? Focus on what are you trying to get, what are you trying to gain with this kind of opportunity in the Makerspace, and how could you set that up based on the opportunities that you have with the students that you work with. And for some people, you know, they might see them for very short periods of time. Amazing things can happen in short periods of time. So don't use the excuse of, well, I only get to see them for, or I don't have the same set of students each time. You know, they rotate and I may never see them again. That can be fine too. So what are you hoping to get out of that short period of time? And maybe it's just that beginning of what is your thought, what is your idea, and how are you going to make it? Okay, great question. And it's a great question, but it's difficult to answer because there isn't any one answer. And isn't that kind of what we're trying to say to our students too? There isn't any one way to do this. There's lots of different ways. And again, what you might choose for this year might not fit as good next year. It might need to look totally different. Based on the circumstances, students, or what you have access to. There isn't any one way to do it, but that's why the mentality is really important. What is it you want? How do you get students to think creatively and to problem solve? Focus on, you know, those kinds of things, and you can have a makerspace in whatever way that best suits your needs or based on what you have access to. One thing I would highly encourage, regardless of what kind of makerspace you have, is some kind of name or title. So give it a really cool name, something really exciting, something that encourages people to recognize the importance of that space. And what I've listed here is some examples of names of makerspaces, and some of these are public, some of these are based on a school. But you can see in Des Moines, we have a community of makers, and they call their space Area 515. Which is the area code for the telephone numbers where we are. Fab Lab is a really common name what Stanford has. Many people have used that fabrication laboratory kind of lingo. I love the Wheaton Autonomous Learning Lab because they call it the Whale Lab. I think that's really funny because it doesn't tell me that that's a makerspace, but when you understand what it's an acronym for, I think that's really funny. Invention Studio, the Geek Group, the Tinkering Studio, that's what they have at the Exploratorium, Tech Shops, UX, User Experience, Creativity Lab. I mean, there's lots of different ways to name it, but I think it's important because then you can designate that time, that space, that allotted effort that you're going to do and say, okay, now we're moving into our, you know, this time, our creative lab time. So it has an identity, and it helps students to kind of switch that gear, that mentality of what they're doing. I want to show you one more short video. We're just going to watch a little bit of it. And what I think is interesting is this is an international school doing makerspace activities, and it is very focused on Legos, which is a great universal tool, but I think it's interesting how they put this together. So we're going to watch a little bit of this video just to see how they set up their space very different.
Welcome to our Makerspace. Cycle, and it has 5 different parts of the cycles, and this is the emphasize part and the design part, the design part, then plan and create, then evaluate. First, in empathize, you investigate the problems in life. And this is where you think of designs like this. So you design the machines that will work, and then you plan, and then you create, which is the fun part. You create it with Legos. We do Legos, but you can create it with boxes or other things. And then you evaluate it, you test it, if it works or not. And if it does, you're lucky, and if it doesn't, you go to design again, and then brainstorm again, and then plan again, and create it again, and it could work.
This is how the room works. Here's lots of Legos and lots of kind of them. Here's some pins, gears, and wheels. And here's some trays that you can take some Legos that you want. And you bring it and you make it. And we have lots of NXTs. And one of the project is this one, what I made with games, this kind of game. And there are scissors and pencils and glue guns and glues, and there are a lot of different materials to choose. This is Pico Cricut, and this is motor, and this is LED light. It has cool sensors and work with Legos. We have nice big tables and chairs with wheels on. When it touches.
Wow. I like that doorbell.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds like my doorbell at home.
Doing when we're almost certain the prototype can work, then we can go to bubbles.
More water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know.
Oh yeah, it is.
We need chairs pushed in.
It is. Make sure the green light turns on. Then press one of these buttons here, and then the light will change color.
Well, we'll see what it does here. This is going to be interesting.
Oh yeah!
Yeah.
Can you have a marker?
Okay, so what I don't know if you caught that at the end, but this is an international school from Seoul, Korea, and so they were having a makerspace in there, and they had a maker fair there in the town, and it was a great example of how making is an international movement. Really, this idea of thinking and creating and tinkering and problem solving and collaborating and all of that. And I just think that was another great example of how those students were able to do that. They tended to use a lot of Legos. That was something that worked well for them. I liked their system of organization. That's why I wanted to show you the video, how they had the tubs with the different Legos, and they had the trays so they could put their Legos into the trays according to what they needed. I just thought it was a good way to see how they had the room set up. And I love that they had their design cycle posted on the wall. So you saw the student talk about the design cycle and how you go through that. I think that's really important too, that you encourage that mentality of design thinking, and so that they see that and they're reminded when something doesn't go well, that's okay. That's where I'm at in my cycle, and maybe I have to go back to the design phase. Maybe I have to go back and do some more research to get to where I have more information and can change or alter this. A couple more resources that I have for you really quick. I told you that we're going to reference the Youth Makerspace Playbook that is a free downloadable file. And so I brought my version of it. I can show you. This is my downloaded copy of it, and it is a wonderful resource for you that, like I said, it's just a PDF. You can just print it off. Lots of great information. And here's the section on here. It starts on page 10 of places to make, and there's pages as you go through there, and they give you ideas on how to set up a makerspace, what kind of things to put in here, ideas, suggestions. It's a really good document to have, is the Makerspace Playbook. Another resource is the book that we provided for you in your green bag, that is the Invent to Learn book. And again, lots and lots of great information in this book. You can use it basically as a textbook. But in chapter 9 of this book here, one of the things that he talks about, or the authors together talk about in here, is that they say when people enter a room, it's human nature to size it up and get a feeling of whether or not they belong, whether they belong or not. Does it feel familiar? Would I like the people that created and occupy this space? Your makerspace should have a gender-neutral answer. It's about making an effort to show that all kinds of interests and activities are valued. I think that's a really important statement for students to feel when they're in your space, is that they feel like they can be a part of it and they can be creative there and they can find ways to explore their ideas and their creativity in the space, whatever it looks like, the way that you have set that up for them. Okay, final thoughts here. I've had some people asking me about ways to use the Hummingbird kit, ways to use Scratch. And I wanted to share with you, I'm going to show you these, and I can certainly provide the link. Celeste and I held some classes over the summer at the Science Center, some workshops on how to use the Hummingbird material. We'll come back to that some more. We have a whole webinar based on technology, but I'd be happy to share these resources with you. These are some printable documents that are in kind of comic book form, and they walk you through, first of all, how to hook up your Hummingbird, and it kind of goes through it step by step. It would be really great for students to read this so that you don't have to sit there and show them exactly how. It shows them how to physically hook it up and what all the different pieces and components are for. And this one is on using Scratch programming with Hummingbird, specifically so that you know how to use Scratch programming and adapt the Hummingbird to use it that way. If you're using Scratch, adding the Scratch component of, or the Hummingbird part of the Scratch component is really great, because then you can build on what they already know. You do have to download a special version, an offline editor of Scratch. It does have to be downloaded, so it wouldn't be, this part of Scratch wouldn't be web-based, but what it allows you to do is to connect to the Hummingbird blocks that have already been created and then embed those blocks into your coding and programming. So this document can walk you through that, and I can share this with you. This is something that they created. Celeste and I use this in the trainings that we have. We will put together some more opportunities for you to come if you would like to the Science Center, and we can do some more workshops on the technology. I can share more information with you about that at our next webinar. Speaking of our next webinar, it is going to be based on technology in the Makerspace. It'll be on Tuesday, December 4th, same time, same Zoom address, and we're going to be addressing the challenges of having technology in the Makerspace. Remember, technology does not mean that it's something that's plugged in or has a Wi-Fi connection. Technology is a tool, something that you use in order to accomplish something. So we'll focus on that, and then on December 18th, we will look at the challenges and outcomes of maker education. What does it look like? How do you assess it? How do you set it up? How do you share that information with parents? These webinars are being recorded, and what we will do is we will get these uploaded to our YouTube site. And then once I have the address, I can send the address out to you and you can watch them again, or you can share them with others who weren't able to be here today. But so you can watch that and have those resources for you. So before we end, very quickly, if there's any questions or comments, you can put those in the chat box and Lori can convey them to me. Again, remember that you should, in the next few weeks, have everything that comes along with your program, which we're excited about. Please share. You can share on the Facebook page. You can share within your own district or the organization that you use. Share with me so I can share it out with others. I really want us to feel supported as a community with each other of asking questions or sharing ways that we've tried things, challenges that we faced. So please ask away if you have questions and share away if you have exciting things that you've tried. Any thoughts or questions that are in the chat room? Chat box.
Wondering if the workshop that you might have could be recorded and uploaded.
Oh, what a great question. I hadn't really thought about that. The way that Celeste and I, we did 2 of them we did them over the summer. We had one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And it really was more of a hands-on that Celeste and I sitting down with participants and really helping them. We had them bring their own laptop and bring their own Hummingbird kit so we could show them how to do it and they could take it back with them. I suppose we could potentially record it. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know how well it would translate, but I suppose maybe we could do that in some capacity. Great question. Anything else?
Just a lot of excitement about the materials and your encouragement and how to use them. Looks like that's about it.
Awesome. If you have questions later, things you're thinking about, seeking ideas, you're always welcome to send me emails and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as I possibly can. I'm excited for you to be receiving your tool cart and the rest of your materials in the next couple weeks so you can really get started on it. And as those things come, if you have questions about them or how to use them, always let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. But I'm super excited for you and excited to see all the amazing things that your students are going to be able to do with the materials from Making STEM Connections. So on that thought, we're going to finish the video. We'll leave the chat box open for a little bit if you have any last final thoughts or questions. Otherwise, I'll see you again in a couple weeks when we have our next webinar on technology in the Makerspace. Thank you. Bye, guys.